So, good to see you. So, it was an important day today for the Prime Minister, for Mary and I, because we indeed announced a big piece that is part of the Indo-Pacific strategy, which is $700 million of investments in infrastructure, which is exactly what the region needs and exactly what Canadians need to make sure that we create good jobs also back home.
Yeah, absolutely. 750.
750, you're right, 750.
So it is terrific. $750 million to unlock the private capital to build here in the region. I've been here a few times, and every time that I'm in the region, the Canadian brand is really strong. And what the region also says to us is that there are a number of infrastructure needs and therefore opportunities for Canadians, green infrastructure projects, but very simple things like roads and bridges as well. And the $750 million that's going to go to FinDev Canada is going to help us unlock that private sector capital to help us create really good projects here in the region.
So it's big economic news for the business community back home, for Canadians in general, and also for business people here.
Yep.
Okay, so we're ready to take your very easy questions. We're not taking any tough questions.
When you spoke with your Russian counterpart, did
Yes.
you bring up Chinese interference in Canadian elections?
So first, I didn't talk to my Russian
Sorry,
counterpart.
Chinese, my apologies.
Sorry. So can you repeat that
when
question?
when you spoke with your Chinese counterpart, did you bring up Chinese interference in Canadian
Yes, I did.
elections? And what did they say?
So first and foremost, yes, thank you. So first and foremost, I've said it many times, and I've said it to my counterpart, we won't accept any form of meddling of foreign governments in our elections, and we won't tolerate any form of foreign interference at large in Canada, period. So it's not a discussion, it's intolerable. So that's our position.
What did they say back to you, though? What did they say back to you?
It's not a conversation, it's our position. Meanwhile, we will always make sure that as a government, our security agencies are working on this, are activated, that our law enforcement also agencies are working on this, because this is a top priority and we need to address it.
Madame Joly, pouvez-vous me dire c'était quoi la nature du message que vous et le Premier ministre avez transmis à vos homologues chinois sur l'ingérence dans les élections canadiennes aujourd'hui et quelle a été la réaction?
Mais notre position elle est claire. Notre position elle est claire. Nous n'allons pas accepter aucune forme d'ingérence étrangère dans nos élections, dans notre système démocratique ou de façon générale au Canada. Donc, il n'y a pas de conversation à avoir sur cette question-là. C'est intolérable. Nous n'allons pas le tolérer. Et par conséquent, nous allons faire en sorte, bien entendu, que nos agences de renseignement, que nos forces policières soient impliquées et proactives sur ces questions-là.
What can you tell us about the Prime Minister's meeting with the Chinese president? How did it happen and how did it unfold?
So there were two meetings. The Prime Minister spoke to Xi Jinping, and they had a good conversation on many subjects, and I also had a conversation with my counterpart. We both addressed similar issues. I've just confirmed the question of foreign interference, but also the fact that COP15 in Montreal had to be a success for both countries, but also for the planet, because the issue of biodiversity loss is extremely important. We've said that our position when it comes to China is to make sure that we challenge when we ought to, foreign interference being an example, and also will cooperate when we must, climate change being an example. So these were the types of discussions we were having, and of course, we will always keep an open channel when it comes to discussing with China.
How long did they speak? How long did the two leaders speak?
I don't have the details, but it was a good conversation, and it is important to indeed keep channels open. I've reiterated to my colleague that I'm always available, but at the same time that he can expect that our approach is transparent. We've laid it out, and Canadians expect us to engage that way.
Quel rôle vous voyez?
A lot more aggressive towards China in recent weeks. how would you describe the tone of your conversation with your Chinese counterparts? And can you also talk about the reaction both from the president and your counterpart when it comes to Ukraine and the war in Russia? In your understanding, where is China standing on this?
So first and foremost, it's always respectful with all my colleagues I engage with. This is diplomacy. Our goal is to make sure that there is more peace and stability in the world. I also, and the Prime Minister addressed the issue of nuclear and the fact that it is fundamental that there be no form of proliferation of nuclear weapons, particularly in definitely Ukraine, but particularly also in our region of the world, which is the Northern Pacific, where North Korea is undergoing reckless missile launch and nuclear testing. So these were the issues that were presented by the Prime Minister and myself.
Wait. Juste une autre question en français, s'il vous plaît.
Oui.
J'aimerais ça savoir quel rôle vous voyez pour la Chine dans la résolution de la crise en Ukraine. Qu'est-ce que vous leur avez demandé de faire? Est-ce que vous avez demandé une intervention? M. Macron, aujourd'hui, a demandé aux Chinois d'essayer de ramener M. Poutine à la table des négociations. Est-ce que vous êtes d'accord avec ça? Qu'est-ce que vous leur avez demandé?
C'est important que la question nucléaire soit abordée avec la Chine et que la Chine joue son rôle pour faire en sorte qu'il n'y ait pas de prolifération nucléaire et que certainement qu'on envoie un message fort au président Poutine comme quoi l'utilisation de l'arme nucléaire aurait des conséquences historiques, dramatiques, catastrophiques. Alors bien entendu, nous avons soulevé cet enjeu-là et bien entendu, nous allons toujours le soulever.
J'aimerais vous entendre sur le ton de la conversation. Vous l'avez dit en anglais un petit peu plus tôt, mais comment ça a été reçu? Comment ça s'est passé?
Une conversation très respectueuse. J'ai toujours des relations et des conversations très respectueuses avec mes collègues.
You talked about the fact that it was important to bring up the threat of nuclear war and that Putin needs to be condemned for even considering it at all. How did Russia respond, or China respond to this type of conversation, and where do they seem to stand? Right now, it seems like they're not willing to condemn Russia. And doesn't that make it harder to get consensus and significant movement on the war at a setting like this when China's not getting on board?
Well, like I mentioned, the question of nuclear is extremely important, and we engage with China and other nuclear powers on this issue. And we need to send a very strong message. We will not accept it. Not only will we not accept it, the consequences of nuclear weapons would be catastrophic for the world. And so that's why it is so existential that we need to engage China and other nuclear powers on this issue. As for the question of Ukraine per se, of course it is part of our foreign policy to engage other countries and to make sure that we push for support for Ukraine. And so, of course, we do that in every single interaction we have. And I had many interactions today with many of my colleagues, and I raised it in every single issue. What you can see is that there is a reckoning within the G20 that not only does the war in Ukraine and Russia's illegal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine has a tremendous human toll, human suffering toll, but also that at the same time it has a really big impact on the global economy and on households at the grocery stores.
Are you any closer to signing a joint communique, and will it denounce Russia?
We have been working through negotiations to make sure that we were highlighting the most important aspects of our global challenges as a G20, definitely preparing ourselves for a future pandemic, making sure also that we address the question of climate change. While we are here, our colleagues, and Stephen Guilbeault in particular, is in Egypt negotiating. We wanted to make sure that we're sending a strong message to help negotiations happening in Egypt at the same time. And I've been in contact with Stephen at the same time. And meanwhile, really highlighting the importance of the impact of the war in Ukraine.
And did you tell China?
C'est quoi le seuil minimal que vous voulez avoir dans le communiqué sur la Russie? C'est quoi peut-être l'élément le plus important, au moins un minimum qu'il faudrait avoir?
Comme je l'ai mentionné en anglais, la question de l'Ukraine, elle est au centre de notre politique étrangère. Nous le soulevons dans chacune des interactions que nous avons, certainement le Premier ministre, certainement moi-même également. Et en même temps, je pense qu'il y a une reconnaissance de la part de tous les pays que la guerre en Ukraine, l'invasion illégale par la Russie de l'Ukraine, a un impact sur le monde entier et particulièrement sur l'économie et sur, dans le fond, monsieur, madame, tout le monde au pays.
Did you tell China, or did Prime Minister Justin Trudeau tell China anything at all about Uyghurs in concentration camps, about Taiwan and Hong Kong? You've been saying you want to raise these issues with them directly. Did you do it?
We always raise the questions of human rights. We always also raise the questions of respecting international norms. What I said to my counterpart is that the respect of international norms was now on his shoulders, and it was his onus. It was, let me rephrase that. What I said to my counterpart, it was on China's shoulder to show that it was respecting international norms.
Thank you. That's
Thank
all the time
you.
we have.
Can we just ask you one question about the 700?
Yes.
Can you just explain
See,
how-
that's a good news.
How
Please.
it's going to work with FinDev? Can you just kind of bring us through that process?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're going to provide $750 million to let FinDev do the work of providing what is essentially concessional financing, and that's going to be really helpful because in this region, those infrastructure needs are quite substantive, and what this concessional financing will do is unlock the private sector capital that is out there that is looking to invest in these projects. And what's really good about how is it good for Canadians and how is it good for Canadian companies? There are many Canadian companies that are operating here in this region, in the Indo-Pacific. We want more of that, and we want Canadian companies. I can think of one project in the Philippines. It's WSP. They built the Manila Skyway. It's projects like this that exist in the region. And yesterday I met with CPPIB, the pension fund that is that's invested in a road, a toll road here in Indonesia, unlocking that private sector capital through the concessional financing that will help economies like those here in the Indo-Pacific is really going to help us get projects built.
How long will it take to actually unlock this funding? So before sort of the first project in the Indo-Pacific region is built using the money that's available now?
Well, there are already projects that are working here in the region. Can Build is something we already are doing. This really is going to help us really scale this up and do it, at a much higher pace. And look, there's a lot of renewable and green infrastructure that the region really is looking for, because where we share something in common, Canada and this region, building green and getting our economy going greener. And I would say we've got a tremendous number of small and medium-sized businesses in these value chains who are going to be a part of these infrastructure projects, particularly in services, and it would be terrific for me to see a number of women entrepreneurs be a part of that supply chain.
Madame Joly, est-ce que vous avez parlé à Bras aujourd'hui?
Non, j'ai dit que j'allais pas le parler.
Est-ce que vous avez adressé un message à la Russie aujourd'hui autour de la table? Est-ce que le Premier ministre avait est-ce que vous pouvez nous résumer ce que le Premier ministre avait à dire sur la
Oui,
Russie
le Premier ministre a eu à répondre à la Russie, et puis il a été extrêmement clair sur la position du Canada et sur le fait aussi de dénoncer toute forme de désinformation et toute forme de mensonge utilisé par la Russie lorsque vient la question de l'Ukraine. Merci.